Welcome to the many interpretations of General Grievous. That's right, happy May the 4th. Of course, today is Star Wars Day, and so I figured we can kind of step out of our usual niche and just kind of like talk about something else that I'm incredibly passionate about, that being the franchise known as Star Wars. And to get more specific with it, I want to talk about my favorite character, that being General Grievous. He's been my favorite since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, since I was about like 6 or 7 or something like that. He's an absolutely amazing character that I would just absolutely love to talk about for about 15 to 20 minutes, however long this video will be. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. We will start off with his technically first on-screen appearance, that being the 2003 Clone Wars. This set the bar incredibly high for General Grievous. The Clone Wars, the 2003 series, the animated series that was done by Genndy Tartakovsky, was essentially just like like it bridged the gap between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. And as a result, it introduced a lot of new characters and variables that will be introduced in Revenge of the Sith officially. One of those would be General Grievous, who will be one of the main villains in Revenge of the Sith. But because this show was being developed while Revenge of the Sith was also being developed, that means that there were likely going to be some changes that happened while, this was all happening. Grievous was one of those changes. When George first gave them like the details of Grievous when they first started to develop his character to add him into the show, he was very different compared to how he ended up being. Initially, he was going to be this unstoppable force, like a pure Jedi hunter. And while he still was that in the end, there were a lot of elements that were changed, such as the fact that he actually has a cough in the movie version, whereas in the show, he doesn't have a cough. And so as a result, they had to have Mace Windu crush his chest at the end of the show to explain the cough. But regardless, this is one of the biggest reasons why Grievous became one of my favorite characters. We are introduced to him in an episode where it's clear that the Jedi are just getting absolutely demolished by a ton of battle droids. And this is where Grievous finally reveals himself to the Jedi. This is like months into the Clone Wars. Single-handedly, he attacks and defeats 5 Jedi. Also, Shaggy, who is basically Shaggy. That's fun. This animation was just incredibly insane, and it's something that I love to return to every once in a while just to see all of the really cool animation details and things like that. The fact that he picks up a lightsaber with his foot instead of using one of his extra pair of arms. I just like the idea that Grievous is just so confident in himself right here that he's like, you know what? I got 2 more arms, but I'm going to pick this up with my foot, and I'm going to finish fighting you, Ki-Adi-Mundi, with this lightsaber in my foot. It's very cool. His design is also awesome. You have this huge towering appearance with some white armor and kind of grayish mechanical parts. Everything about it just looks absolutely amazing. And also scenes where he's demolishing a whole bunch of clone troopers is also really cool. Just 10 out of 10 appearance, really set the bar incredibly high. After that would be his technically second on-screen appearance, that being, I just put up 5 when I said second. I'm gonna have to really rethink things. But this was technically his second appearance after the Clone Wars 2003 series. As I said, a lot of things were kind of like they were made a little bit different here. George wanted to recontextualize Grievous as a character that would run before he would face defeat. So he's often called a coward by other characters like Mace Windu and whatnot. And I guess you could see some of that in the 2003 Clone Wars. I mean, even Dooku told him, hey, if you're losing a fight, it'd be better for you to run, which is probably something that was added later on in development of the 2003 Clone Wars. Either way, still awesome here. This is just amazing CGI. It's really cool to see the reveal of the extra pair of arms, and then he just starts spinning them because his hands can spin independently from the rest of his arm. And I just love all of the attentions to detail, like all the mechanical parts, of course, all of his internal organs, and a lot of things that hint at his past life, that being the life of a Kaleesh warlord. Those being the sort of markings that you see above his eyes that hint at the fact that this is a character that's a little bit bigger than he's not just a droid, and of course, a lot of people do call him a droid, but he is a cyborg. He still does have organic parts. And we're going to talk about a little bit more about that as we go on. But yeah, another fantastic depiction right here. Love the way that he looks. It's just a little bit unfortunate that he's not quite the same as he was in the 2003 Clone Wars, but I still think he's awesome. Then we have the 2008 Clone Wars, the CGI show that made up such a huge part of my childhood, though Grievous was not done nearly as well in this as he should have. Something that really bums me out about this show is that you had 7 seasons to really flesh out Grievous a little bit more, and they never did. It's kind of sad to me that Savage Opress, who was in this show, significantly less than Grievous, killed more Jedi than Grievous did. Grievous only killed 1 Jedi. Savage killed, off the top of my head, about 3 Jedi. He might have killed more that I might be blanking out on it. That's unfortunate because Grievous is uh, referred to as like the Jedi Hunter. He was a huge problem for the Jedi Order. We even see in the Lair of Grievous episode, he has a ton of lightsabers and Padawan braids and things like that because he's already killed a lot of Jedi. And I think it's canon that he killed around 200 Jedi after the about the first year of the Clone Wars, either the first or the second year. Either way, he had killed, canonically, he has killed a lot of Jedi over the course of the Clone Wars, which is 3 years. But we just don't see a lot of that. And of course, he mostly fights main characters, which means that he's not going to win nearly as much as he probably should. I just wish that there was a few moments where he's fighting non-main characters that you don't see in the films, and he can have a chance to actually kill those ones and really cement himself as a huge threat that he was supposed to be in the Clone Wars. Still, I like his design here. It is different from his movie version. A lot of his armor is a lot more streamlined and just elongated compared to the way it is in the movie. Now, that could just be the art style of the Clone Wars, but you can also say that maybe he had a different body earlier on in the war. And I'm going to explain why I think that later on in the video. Actually, like right after this. No, actually, I'm going to explain why I think that right now. And that's because in season 7, we get it revealed that he has a brand new model. It looks a lot more like the Revenge of the Sith model. Now, that could just be them just updating his model, trying to make it look more like the films. I mean, they even tried to make Anakin look more like Hayden Christensen by the final season. But in my own little head, I like to think that he just, got a new body that looks a little bit more like his Revenge of the Sith appearance. That's just my head canon, I suppose. Hello, future Dino guy here. I just wanted to pop in and say that my little head canon theory does not really hold up to scrutiny, because of course we do see General Grievous again in Tales of the Empire during the massacre on Dathomir, and he has the brand new model. As we know, the massacre of Dathomir already happened in the Clone Wars, and by that point, of course, he had a different model entirely. So this change in the model is simply just them changing the design. The reason why he looked the way that he did before was simply probably just because of the art style. But hey, of course we can still say in our heads that he got an upgrade later on. I don't know. Anyway, that model is amazing. Of course, we see it there, and then we see it again in the Bad Batch at the very beginning of the show when they have the Clone Wars style opening. And then we finally get to see it in action in Tales of the Empire. Such a beautiful model that just looks so sick. And his appearance in Tales of the Empire, awesome. I'd say that one of the most menacing things that Grievous did was, of course, the massacre on Dathomir, when he kills all the Dathomirian witches. So when we get that a little bit more expanded, it kind of adds a lot of the terror that should be felt in something like that. And also, Grievous with his cape on just looks so flipping cool. Like, I love that he keeps his cape on in Tales of the Empire. Like, what's funny to me about that is that this is after he fought Ventress, and he took his cape off to fight Ventress. So I like the idea that, like, after he fought Ventress and he, killed most of the witches there, he was like, wait, I got to get my cape back. And then he goes back and he puts it back on, and then he kills more witches. I don't know. Grievous with the cape on is just an awesome looking dude. He does have a brief appearance in Republic Commando where he, looks like this. Not too much else I can add onto it. It's pretty faithful to his movie depiction. And the same can also be said for the original Star Wars Battlefront 2. It's just, different. It's a video game version, so it's going to look a little bit different. But also the same is definitely said for the 2017 Battlefront 2. It looks amazing there. I think that Grievous looks so good in that. But my favorite thing about that one is that he, you have skins. There's one that has a little bit of battle damage on it, but then there's one that has a lot of battle damage on it, and you can like see part of his face underneath his face mask. That one is awesome. And like the fact you can see like some burning embers and like a torn cape. Whenever I'm playing, like that's the skin that I use when I'm playing. Whenever I'm playing as Grievous, I like to think that he's been fighting for like days and he's just so damaged, but he's still going. That adds a lot to it. And little fun fact about that, they actually had to essentially kind of fight for that skin or really negotiate for it, because at the time, Lucasfilm was big on keeping things consistent with canon, and that included a lot of the Star Wars skins. That's why they never really went too crazy with skins in Battlefront 2 when they definitely could have. And so they had to really push for this skin because it's technically not canon. We never saw Grievous in this sort of state in the show, like this damaged. Of course, there had been instances where he was shot in the eye in the Lair of Grievous and whatnot, but we've never seen him in this state. So it was something that they had to push for, and I'm glad that they did because it's by far my favorite skin. Okay, now I also want to talk about pre-cyborg General Grievous. This is Grievous before he became a cyborg, hence the name pre-cyborg. Anyway, that is an awesome appearance right there. Now that's an awesome appearance right there. Like, there's just so much story that goes into a look like this, especially with the mask, of course, that has those markings that I was talking about earlier, and just all of that. Grievous's story is different in Legends compared to the way it was in canon. In canon, he actively chose to have these enhancements applied to him because he wanted to be on the same level as Jedi. You know, he didn't like the fact that Jedi were force sensitive and he wasn't. Whereas in Legends, he was a Kaleesh warlord, and that's actually true for canon too. We have seen pre-cyborg Grievous in canon before in the 2008 Clone Wars, as in a really awesome comic that I own. But his story goes a lot deeper in Legends. In Legends, he was a Kaleesh warlord that was at war with the species known as the Yamri, or the Huck. The Huck were basically these giant praying mantis creatures. They were attacking Grievous's homeworld of Kali for years, and they were really being a huge nuisance to the Kaleesh. Eventually, Grievous had gained command, and he pushed the Yamri, or the Huck, back to their homeworld. Now, the Huck, being pushed back to their homeworld and losing a lot of their forces, ran to the Republic, to the Senate, to ask for assistance. Now, the Huck actually had a seat on the Senate. That means that the Senate, they were willing to help the Huck out, and as a result, they sent Jedi to go and help them. The Jedi pushed the Kaleesh back, and that is something that helped develop Grievous's hatred towards the Jedi. At some point, he was also approached by the Separatists to help them in their growing movement, because this is when the Separatists were really starting to gain some traction. There was a lot of systems that were leaving the Republic, and they were wanting to do their own thing. Initially, Grievous turned it down. He did not want to do that because he wanted to stick with his people. He was a very proud general, and so leaving his people behind is definitely something that he did not want to do. And so, as a result, Count Dooku had planted a bomb on Grievous's ship. Oh, by the way, I completely forgot to mention this, but Grievous's original name was Kaimain Jai Shilal. So, yeah, he wasn't always called Grievous. He actually, it's a long history, and I won't get into it. I won't get into it all, but he changed his name to Grievous because he actually lost his loved one, his significant other, his better half, so to speak. And so he changed his name to Grievous because he was a grieving one. So yeah, but his original name was Kaimain Jai Shilal, which I think is pretty cool. Anyway, Dooku did plant a bomb on Grievous's ship. That bomb went off and left Grievous completely mangled. They rebuilt him into the cyborg that we all know and love today, and essentially he had no choice but to serve them. They also kind of like tweaked a few things in his brain, kind of made him a little bit more aggressive and just a little bit easier to control. And to have this version fit in with the canon version, my head canon is that they actually tweaked a lot of things in his brain to make him think that he chose to do this. That way he wouldn't rebel against them. So it's like the official canon answer of why Grievous is cybernetic is because he chose to do it. But in reality, he only thinks that he chose to do it. That's just my head canon. I like to think of that. But yeah, his pre-cyborg self is really cool. I really think that it's an awesome design. There's also Grievous in Minecraft. In Path of the Jedi, you get this Grievous that's a little bit more faithful to the show, just like with a bigger head. But of course, you can have a General Grievous skin, which I do. That's the skin that I rock. And it's just, you have Grievous basically just drawn onto a Minecraft skin. There's not too much else to say about that. Lego has had a few different General Grievous figures. There was the original General Grievous figure right here. It's not gonna be able to focus too well, but they made a brand new head mold and a body piece for Grievous here, but they did give him battle droid feet, or legs rather, which I thought was always interesting. It's very cool, and it's like a very nostalgic piece, especially if you played something like Lego Star Wars on the PlayStation 2 like I did. But then later on, when I was closer to a teenager, they made this figure, which is really screen accurate to the 2008 Clone Wars Grievous. Everything that makes up this Grievous is all a brand new mold. These arms are all brand new. These legs are brand new. And like this head is brand new and the body is brand new. And what's interesting is the way that they made it so that you can have 4 arms on Grievous is that these pieces... right here, they're a little bit rounded on the end. It's not focusing too well. My camera's not great at that. They're a little bit rounded on the end, so you can kind of like just clip them onto each other like that. so he can have all 4 of his arms, which is pretty cool. On top of that, Grievous was recently added to Fortnite. Now, first of all, the Fortnite skin looks amazing. I don't know how Fortnite does such a good job at like translating these things into the game, and I'm definitely like we're going to be working to get that. But there's also the minifigure version, because you can also play the Lego game in Fortnite, and it's different from the other 2 that we've seen. It's actually just a classic minifigure body with a Grievous head and just Grievous printing, which I think is pretty interesting. Of course, that's just so that you can play as it as a minifigure. That way they don't have to, change the model up too significantly. It's essentially just like a different skin, but it's different, and I quite like it. So Lego Grievous is, of course, top notch. And then finally, just a random one that I wanted to throw in there. There is The Simpsons. He shows up briefly in one of the shorts. I don't remember which one specifically, but I do remember seeing it. He's helping out at a daycare. It's got to be pretty useful having 4 arms in a situation like that. I could definitely use 4 arms in a lot of situations if I'm being real, but yeah. Anyway, those are some of the depictions of General Grievous. That is most likely not all of the depictions. Grievous has shown up in a multitude of different video games and other such portrayals. Most of those will remain consistent with his 2005 Revenge of the Sith appearance, so there's not too much I can add to them anyway. Like, I know that he showed up in the Revenge of the Sith video game, and probably a lot more appearances that I'm spacing on right now. But yeah, if you haven't noticed, I do have quite a bit of General Grievous merch in the background. He's my favorite character. He's awesome. I even have this. Oh, it's heavy, but I have this. This is something that I have. Look how awesome Grievous is. Like, this is just awesome. Also, fun fact, in the expanded universe, Grand Admiral Thrawn eventually ends up with Grievous's mask after Grievous's death, of course. And I think that's cool, because Thrawn is another one of my favorite characters. And so the idea that Thrawn actually ended up with like something with Grievous is really cool. I love that. But that's pretty much all I have for this one today. Thank you everybody for watching. I hope that I have quite a few Star Wars fans in on my channel. I just hope that you guys got a lot of enjoyment out of this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and consider checking out my Patreon if you want to help support the channel, as well as consider being a channel member if you want to help support the channel. You get access to a lot of really cool perks if you join either one of those. So if it's something you're interested in, then, the links are down below. But yeah, I'll see you guys in another video, and may the 4th be with you.